Hello, amazing person. Welcome to season 3 of the Dear Catalyst Coach podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Cooley. My specialty is helping leaders like you go rogue. Each week, I offer a reading and unpack my week's blog post, sharing additional stories from my life, including how I went rogue. Rebecca's Gone Rogue is one of my favorite ways of being described by one of my previous employers. I'm very proud of my legacy. Plus, I go deep on all things introversion, leadership, career shifts, and stress reduction. I'll be answering questions like how do I overcome imposter syndrome, reduce public speaking anxiety, and reduce my negative self-talk. So tune in each week and let's go rogue together. Get inspired to take action, go rogue in your life, start that inner revolution, and be the catalyst in your own life. Wishing you lots of peace, joy, and freedom. Hello, wonderful person. Welcome to this week's episode, Feeling Stuck When Willpower Doesn't Work. When we think of a stress response or fear-generated responses, we generally think of fight and flight. We think of defending or fighting against the threat or withdrawing or running away from it. Other responses include fawn, when we succumb to the threat or befriend it. Another way of saying this is going into pleasing mode, and also the freeze response. The freeze response is where we either voluntarily or involuntarily do not act, move, or react in the face of danger or a threat, and we remain completely still. This stillness stemming from a stress or fear response can also be thought of as stuckness. When we think of changing our habits, the initial push to make the change can feel challenging. We've gotten into a rhythm of doing things that feel comfortable, even if they run counter to what we truly want for ourselves. We create goals of health, self-care, fitness, wellness, balance, and we proceed to muster up the willpower to course correct and steer the ship against the grain. We know that we are creating new neural pathways. We know that it takes 21 days to change a habit. We've watched the videos, read the books, know the hacks. For some of us, the tips and strategies for getting unstuck have worked. For those of us who see the change in others, or see the change that others have made, but for whom the strategies have not worked, we can easily feel deflated in our attempts and our efforts. Why for some and not for others? Is this sheer willpower alone to make a change, to go from stuck to unstuck? So I think it's much, much deeper. I think it goes back to why we became stuck in the first place. If the original reason we became stuck is at a surface level, then we began a pattern or a habit because it was convenient, it was easy, it was comfortable. Then sure, it makes sense that the habit itself has no deeper roots and can easily be changed with 21 days, 21-day challenge, willpower, or hacks. If, on the other hand, the habit or pattern originated as a stress or fear response as a way to fight or rebel, as a way to flee or withdraw or evade, as a way to fawn, keep the peace, or as a way to freeze, which is not to act, then willpower and strategies alone will not address the root. So this is where the adage of the only way out is in applies. If you've set a goal for yourself time and time again, and for years even have made no movement, and there's not been any consistent, sustainable change with that particular goal, instead of blaming yourself or feeling defeated or like you failed or experiencing shame and thinking something is wrong with you, look deeper. The answer is often deeper for folks like us whose habits were created from a fear or stress response. It's not always fair, but we do have more work to do than our counterparts. So it's not always easy to look deeper. I know this firsthand. It can be scary, especially if we have not yet cultivated the mindfulness and somatic tools to manage the fear of looking deeply. Being a radical student of self and looking deeply at the roots of our issues is brave work, and you're so courageous for considering it, and even more for doing it. Looking deeply for the root of your habit or pattern and the root of your stuckness is to truly get to know yourself. It is to go to that shadow place in the past and place the healing balm once and for all. It is to say, I am truly ready for change. I am truly ready to heal, and I'm truly ready to connect with all parts of myself and give myself what I need. To love all parts of ourselves, including the parts of ourselves who are playing out the past pain, and the parts of self that are still stuck and refuse to budge. This is self-compassion. We can easily succumb to being an inner bully to these parts of ourselves and allow the inner critic to blame, shame, criticize, and hold contempt for the parts of us that are hurting and have a hard time getting with the program. For those of us who are new to the idea that we have different parts of psyche, think of it this way. There's a part of you who decided, I have a goal. I want to make a protein or veggie smoothie for myself every day. And day after day, that part of yourself remembers the goal. And day after day, you do not make the smoothie. Why? Is it because the part of you who made the goal is weak, undisciplined, can't follow through, has no willpower? No. There's another part of your psyche which has pumped the brakes on movement towards self-care, health, wellness, self-nurturance. Why? This is the bigger question that only you can answer for yourself. This is the root. Why would there be one part of psyche that clearly wants change, movement, health, and another part of the psyche that seemingly does not? Is it possible that while one part of the self is ready for health, self-care, and nurturance, another part of your psyche is not? And why would all parts of our psyche not be ready for health, self-care, and nurturance? This seems strange. Why wouldn't all parts of our psyche or self not be on board with self-preservation, survival, thriving in a healthy body? So this is where I want to offer a disclaimer. I'm not going to be sharing about trauma, my personal trauma, but it does come up in this conversation, in this discussion. So I can't speak for others. I can only speak for myself. For me, during my most troubling times in childhood, while there were certainly fight and flight responses which showed up at various times, the freeze response, which kept me stuck for many, many years, continued. And the way it showed up was in my relationship with myself, my ability to connect with myself and soothe myself, and also provide myself with nurturance. So what does this mean in a general sense? When a person experiences a deeply distressing experience that generates fear or stress in their bodies and minds, the person goes into a variety of stress responses to react to the threat, whether that be a threatening person or a threatening situation. A body and mind which has gone through such an experience continues the need to recalibrate from the experience. Recalibration means the need to release the stress and move forward without residual traces of the stress in the body or mind. When a person does not realize the impact of a stressful experience or the impact on their body and mind, they may not be aware of the necessary release process. So they carry the stress with them and they carry the fear with them. When a person experiences interpersonal relational stress or trauma, long after the situation has ended, it is likely that the person continues to carry the stress and fear of relationships, connection, interpersonal interactions, and communication. When a person experiences interpersonal relational stress or trauma with a parent or parental figure, when they did not experience the nurturance, care, love, acceptance, comfort, warmth from their caregivers, but instead received emotional or physical neglect, contempt, coldness, criticism, it is likely the person will continue to carry the stress and fear of these experiences into adulthood and into their relationship with others and with themselves. For a child who cannot care for themselves, the threat in these scenarios is the threat of death or of not surviving. If our caregivers stop caring, the child's chances of survival is significantly impacted. For those of us who have experienced and survived traumatic childhoods, emotionally neglectful childhoods, or childhoods where our basic needs of warmth, comfort, unconditional love, loving care were not provided, we may have fought, may have run away, and we may have tried to people please, all in an attempt to survive. For some of us, as we got older, we may have become frozen in our ability to care for ourselves, comfort ourselves, nurture ourselves, soothe ourselves, give our minds and bodies what they need, whether it be a smoothie, exercise, a clean home, kind internal dialogue. As adults, we may have stopped caring for ourselves, our bodies, our homes as a result of not feeling cared for, and are continuing to carry out that childhood pain through a deep disconnection with ourselves and our own needs. These stressful experiences can affect the body and have many physical and emotional symptoms, from depression to anxiety to exhaustion. At times, the mental and physical exhaustion of stress and the residue of a stressful experience in one's life can leave a person on high alert, zapping their energy. It's not until the individual experiences a state of equilibrium can that small surge of energy to care for their home and body arise. For the individual who has experienced high levels of stress and trauma, equilibrium may even feel like boredom. It is possible that a sense of safety is the reason for their surge of energy, and to do the thing, the chore, the habit. The individual is able, at least momentarily able, to step out of survival mode because the nervous system has had a chance to recalibrate and relax, and the person finds the energy to expend on self-care, home care, self-nurturance. The human body and mind need nurturance. But because some of us did not receive it in childhood, the desire to offer it to ourselves is interrupted. We do not have loving caregivers and therefore no model for what a loving, tender caregiver does. So how then can we self-parent in a loving, effective way when the parenting we received as children was potentially unloving or ineffective? So when we think of creating a goal relating to self-care or taking care of our bodies, our minds, our homes, this other part of us, this part of our psyche, which is still stuck in the pain of not receiving nurturance from our caregivers, is essentially frozen. So how do we unfreeze this part of ourselves so we can give ourselves exactly what we need, exactly what was not given? Where do we start? So here I just share a list of just things that we can do, a list of 5. So 1, inquire. When you create a goal for yourself relating to your home, your body, your relationship with yourself, ask yourself, is it difficult to achieve that goal? Is the difficulty easily resolved, or has it been years of trying and effort? Is there a deeper root to the difficulty with your goals relating to self-nurturance? 2, breathe. Give yourself compassion, grace, and honor your pace for looking more deeply at the root. Realize this place of grace and compassion may be enough to become unfrozen. Getting harsh and critical with oneself rather than giving oneself grace and compassion can actually derail and create even more interruption to your heart's desire to make positive change. Grace does not mean you forgo self-parenting. It means that with a deep understanding and wisdom of the root issue, you realize that the typical route of willpower alone and self-discipline is not the whole picture for your unique situation, your person, your heart, and your history. This is wisdom. There is so much more at work here, and you know it. So grace, compassion, and wisdom offered to self can be a healing balm to begin the unstuck, unfreeze process. It's radical, it's new, and you can do it. 3, connect. Connect deeply with the part of your psyche who is still frozen. Be gentle, loving, kind, compassionate, warm, and approach this part of yourself as if it was a crouched puppy in a corner shivering from fear. This is the part of your psyche that is locked and stuck and frozen from those stressful experiences of physical and emotional neglect or harm. Imagine that you have all the resources to give it what it needs to release its fear. Imagine yourself giving this part of yourself exactly what it needs. Release. Release fear, not only in the mind, but also in the body. Remember, freeze and stuck is a fear response. Fear is stored in the mind and the body. Releasing can happen in many ways. You can cognitively remind yourself it is safe now, safe to move, safe to de-thaw. Somatic and mindful bodily exercises to help the body feel safe are a great idea to help yourself through this as well. And 5, self-parent. You can move to a deeper place of resolving to take care of this part of your psyche, the hurt part, to love it and nurture it. You can resolve to take good care of your home, your body, yourself, and your heart, even if you did not experience that from your caregivers. You can resolve to be your own caregiver, to be your own inner parent. You can start with small nurturing or soothing activities that feel loving and tender. In times of seeming resistance to the new habit, which will show up as frozenness or stuckness to self-nurturance, you can breathe deeply into the belly. You can hum, sing to yourself, rock your body, coddle yourself in a blanket, offer yourself a warm bath or a warm cup of tea, use a weighted blanket, place your hands at your heart center and tap left hand, then right hand, as if you were soothing a baby or a child. Sit with yourself. Feel your feelings as they arise as bodily sensations. For many of us, the journey to self-nurturance, to self-care is a deep inner journey. Honor your journey by offering yourself grace whenever creating a new habit seems challenging or difficult. It's unlikely about willpower or self-discipline. So there's no blame, no shame, no guilt, only gentle, warm embraces as you discover your roots and offer healing balm. My wish for you today and always is gentle, healing balm. Okay, let's unpack this week's episode. So typically in an episode unpacking, I go into personal stories, and I do intend to do that here. But before we begin, I just want to let you know that I'm not going to be discussing my trauma. The reason I'm sharing that is just to give you that disclaimer so that you can know that you don't have to emotionally, prepare yourself for a lot of stories about personal details in that regard. Um, Stories, yes, but not about that. And the most important reason for this is I'm very conscientious of trauma dumping. And so I want to take a moment here just to discuss what trauma dumping is. We won't spend long here, and then we'll get back to what we need to talk about, but it is relevant because when we're discussing and bringing up and discovering our roots of our habits and why we do what we do, we're going to be there's a potential that for us to discover that it could definitely be related or connected to or tied to past stressful events or trauma. And so when that comes up, we're definitely going to be reaching out to um, either a therapist or a counselor, but we also may be reaching out to for some of us, to our friends and family. And when that does occur, it's always important to just be aware of this concept of trauma dumping and also the concept of, asking permission for, to give the person emotional time to emotionally prepare for being able to hold space for you in that regard. They may not everybody's going to be emotionally prepared, and that could be detrimental to both you and the other person. So if you've never heard of trauma dumping, it's just simply when a person launches into their past trauma in the middle of a conversation to someone that's not really expecting that. And they're not really, the person that's discussing their trauma isn't really thinking about the feelings of the other person or the listener, or whether or not the person is emotionally prepared to hear about the trauma or to be able to hold space for that for that person that's talking about their trauma. So an example of this is when you have a friend and you're just having a regular conversation, and you're completely under the impression that the conversation will be lighthearted, so you're emotionally prepared for lighthearted. And your friend begins talking about their emotional strife or their past pain, their trauma, or their difficulties. And that's typical for most conversations with friendships. It can organically move in any direction. But sometimes the people that we're talking to, or the people that are listening, or when we're listening to others talk about their hardships, we're not always emotionally prepared. And so this is just a way for us to create healthy boundaries in our relationships and our conversations if we feel the need to. So as a good friend, you switch gears, you listen, and you offer emotional support, encouragement, and uplift. This is typical. But you were not prepared emotionally, and the friend did not necessarily prepare you or ask you if you were okay with them going into their trauma with you. They didn't ask if you were emotionally prepared. So for many reasons, you show up for that friend anyway, even though it takes an emotional toil on you. You may be an empath. Um, the next time you talk with that friend, they do it again. They launch in again about their trauma or emotional anguish. And again, without really thinking about your emotional preparedness and how it may impact you emotionally. So again, this is what trauma dumping is. So just keep in mind that not everyone is aware that they're trauma dumping, um, and it's not their fault. So awareness can help them understand, and boundaries can help you steer the conversation to what you are emotionally prepared for and able to give at any given time. So, sorry, I just had to put that in there. So in this week's episode, we talk about discovering whether the root of our current habits and behaviors originate from a stress response to a traumatic event or a stressful event. In our culture, we tend to think that tying our current behaviors to the root of trauma is an excuse. Not in a therapeutic setting, but that is definitely something that is pretty pervasive in our culture. We say, oh, that's an excuse. This tendency toward confusing understanding and wisdom with an excuse has permeated Western psychology also the coaching industry and the self-help industry. So it's no wonder why we have no compassion for ourselves and no understanding when we're having a hard time and we're feeling stuck in our changes and in changing our habits. So the people that we're taking cues from and learning these mind hacks from um, to get us out of our bad habits sometimes don't always understand the ties that our habits and behaviors have to trauma. And that's understandable. they focus instead on changing the surface level behaviors and beliefs. And that's kind of where we stay as a society, as a culture. We stay at that surface level band-aid level. And so when there is understanding, in if they're not a trauma therapist, they may be looking more for a cognitive behavioral change rather than recommending trauma work, deeper trauma work. So I want to say this again, just loud and clear. Understanding your trauma and the various ways trauma can impact your relationship with yourself, your willingness and ability to care for yourself and honor yourself and your belongings and your home. It's not an excuse. When you tie that and make those connections, it's not an excuse. It's wisdom. So when a person who is struggling with a behavior is unable and unwilling to make the changes they've expressed that they want to make, and it's been years, from my own personal experience, trauma has been the root. If you are in the same boat, knowing that trauma may be the root and understanding that trauma may be the root, it's not an excuse, even if your friends, family, or self-help helpers are saying so, even if your mental critic is saying so. So I remember this repeated conversation that I had with my father. He's an organic farmer in an area of the country named with the highest obesity rating in the country. And we were having this conversation about healthy eating, of course. And of course, he believed that the issue was about education, awareness of healthy eating habits and foods. And he thought that and believed that once people knew what to do, they would do it. And so I disagreed. And this conversation came up time and time again. I would say time and again, even if people know exactly what to do and what to eat, they may still not do it, not because they don't want to, but because something emotional is interfering with their willingness to make the healthy changes. And I knew that from my personal experience with my own desire to want to change, but having a lot that was interfering emotionally. So I would share that until people address those deeper emotional things that are interfering with their willingness, they will not have and make lasting, sustainable change. They have to go to the root, to the originating cause that made them unwilling to care for themselves, their bodies, and their lives. And I think that kind of pivoting here, so where do we go from here? Where do we go from this idea of looking at the root and being willing to understand what's interfering emotionally with our desire and willingness to make the changes to take good care of ourselves? So how do we get to the place from not caring about ourselves, our bodies, our homes, and our lives to truly caring? How do we unfreeze from that original stressful experience and become unstuck so we can live the lives that we want and live in health, in mind, body, and home? So for those of us who have struggled for years with behavior change, habit change as it relates to our personal health and wellness, or things we want to do for our homes, or changes we want in our relationship with our own selves, if we can get to that place where we acknowledge with compassion and grace that our stuckness began with trauma, we are one step closer to becoming unstuck and unfrozen. If we can get past the inner critic, fed by the error of our age, that we are just making excuses, or we're just lazy, or we just need to do a 21-day challenge, or just need more education and knowledge of the right way, the formula, the formulaic, the prescriptive, then we can open the door to deeper healing and ultimately real sustainable change. I truly believe from this journey that I've been on and seeing the journey in friends and partners, my coaching partners, to look within is very brave. And to go against what we've been told our whole lives and what we tell ourselves our whole lives about habit change, that's radical. That's revolutionary. So no, the unpacking of this week's episode isn't about me going through a litany of that past trauma. There's no purpose for us to do that here. When we as individuals have trouble for years with changing habits, we know something else is at play. We all know that. We know there isn't a simple fix. And we know that because at some level, We do not we do not believe that we're broken. So being fixed, we know isn't going to be the answer. And if we don't know that we're not broken, I'm telling you now, you are not broken. If the people in your life feel that there's something wrong with you, if they're telling you that you're broken, if you feel that there's something wrong with you and that you're broken, just know that this is shame. That is what shaming and shame is. Feeling that there's something deeply wrong with self or being told that there's something wrong with you. Being told that you're broken is the same as being told there's something wrong with you. And there's nothing wrong with you. If anyone ever tells you that you are broken, or if you're telling yourself that you're broken, I'm going to share with you now what I tell myself to help me get out of that mentality of broken. I say, I'm not broken. I've gone through a lot in my life. I am a survivor. I'm strong. I am resilient. I know what I've been through, and I don't have to explain it to anyone. I choose to share my story at times and with people who are ready and able to truly hear me. I alone know what I am growing, that I am growing, and never stop growing. I stay deeply connected with myself as I learn about myself and grow and heal. And I allow help from people who do not see me as broken, but who see me as whole and complete, because I am whole and complete. I resolve to live my life. I resolve to live. I offer myself compassion, grace, patience, wisdom, tenderness, and love. And my own thawing process continues. I've spent many years of my life working closely with a trauma therapist, and it has been a huge part of what has changed my life and helped to unfreeze the parts of me that were slowly, gradually ready to become unfrozen. So there's been a place in my life for Western psychology as well as Eastern psychology and also mind, body, spirit methods that have all helped in my healing journey. It's all been a part of it. From all of the formal and informal training I've taken on stress reduction, relaxation, self-compassion, mindfulness, meditation, self-connection, I have these tools in my toolbox now to help myself through challenging moments where I feel stuck, where I feel frozen, or I've gone into that stress or fear response. So in my coaching partnerships, I share strategies and techniques from my formal training in relaxation, mindfulness, self-compassion, but I'm not a trauma therapist. And for the deeply frozen parts of self and psyche, I'm not able to help in this way, so I regularly recommend trauma therapy and somatic EMDR therapy. For our time together here in this unpacking, just know that because of my trauma, I did become frozen in my ability to connect with myself, nurture myself, honor my needs and boundaries, care for my home, and care for my body. I tried all the hacks from diets to 21-day challenges, from OA to nutrition coaching, and the list goes on and on and on. Class after class, workshops, seminars. But it wasn't until I began looking at the root and the reason why one part of me was unwilling to change that true change began to happen in my life. And I remember when the exact moment of realization and of willingness occurred to me. I was in a mind, body, spirit healing session with a shaman, and the session itself illuminated the frozen part of me, the unwilling part of me, to make the change towards connecting deeply and nurturing my body. In that moment, I knew more clearly what I needed to work on mentally and emotionally. So my willingness to care for myself had been interrupted by the trauma. My willingness had become frozen, and I was stuck for a long time, many, many years. My own journey of thawing is what I would consider my life's work. I'm committed to and recommit every day. I continue to use the strategies each and every day. Some have become second nature. And yes, many of my habits have changed, especially the habits rooted from my freeze response to trauma. And the change has been lasting and sustainable, and it's ongoing. So I continue to notice and am mindfully and compassionately aware of the remnants of my trauma and where I'm still frozen or thawing. And I give myself grace and patience because I know harsh criticism or forced change has no place in my journey. And deep and lasting change cannot occur unless we are willing to look deeply, willing to thaw, and willing to offer ourselves grace, patience, understanding, wisdom, and love. So I just want to say this out loud, you've got this. And I know it's not easy, but you do have the resolve you need to unfreeze, to live fully, and to live. You've been listening to Dear Catalyst Coach with me, your host, Rebecca Cooley. Thanks for being here. Tune in weekly on Tuesdays for new episodes. Remember to subscribe so you can be the first to know when new episodes are released. A little bit more about me. I've been helping leaders in Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies achieve their career and communication goals for over 15 years, helping them to create catalytic and lasting change for themselves, their employees, their organizations, and their families. Overcoming hurdles of limiting mindsets, anxiety, lack of confidence, fear, and more. I was named top 16 coaches in Raleigh. I graduated with honors with an MPA concentrating in strategic leadership. I hold a BA with a concentration in speech communication, graduating magna cum laude. I am a certified master coach and a certified meditation instructor with over 1,500 hours of stress reduction training. So you ready for a partner to join you during this revolutionary time in your life? You can reach me at www.catalystactioncoaching.com. I offer private executive coaching and corporate training for teams globally. I'm excited to connect with you, wishing you lots of peace, joy, and freedom.